just stop for a second and think about this moment that I'm having. Because where there is hope, there is healing. And today is no different. Today I am here at Parliament House in Brisbane with fellow adoptees and those that were forced to have their children taken from them, from their arms. Today is the 10-year anniversary of the formal apology where the government finally acknowledged the wrongdoings of taking children from mum's arms and being so discriminative and judgmental and criticising to say that the mums would not be adequate mums. I'm the result of that. My name is Tam Ritchie. My birth name is Tracy Ann Rogers. And for here I stand proud to be part of this momentous activity. And this is what it is. We have a garden in Brisbane. We have roses. You can see Parliament House behind me. But this is the anniversary where we had the ceremony today at Parliament House. And in order for you to really comprehend and understand and actually get the awareness, I feel it's really important for you to really just sit back for a moment and take a listen. Because it's not okay. It's not okay to separate a child from its mum when that's all it is they know. For my journey, for many of you may or may not know, I was taken from my mum. My mum was forced to give me up because she was a single parent. And that decision was taken away from her to be able to raise me. She was taken to a church in Toowoomba. She lived in Brisbane. And that also meant that she had a 10-year-old daughter to a previous husband who had passed away, who then became separated from her mum. So there's trauma there as well. She had to go away for 12 months without her 10-year-old daughter. Her 10-year-old daughter went to live with her sister in Brisbane, and she was forced to work as a slave and be criticised and judged and treated really not nice, and made to sign paperwork to say that when she delivered the baby, there was no touch, that me being the baby plus my identical twin were taken away from her straight away. As a mum myself nowadays, I find it really hard to comprehend that a government could have these policies that could make that decision. I mean, if a mum has the love and wants to be there for their child, they'll do whatever it takes to be there. But when a government comes and intervenes and makes that decision, nothing good comes of it. And I've spent a lifetime searching for my natural roots genetically, for finding out more about my medical history, and also for my children, so that we actually know who our cousins are, who our family is, so that incest doesn't happen. All of these things, all these complications, I've spent my whole life doing and acknowledging the pain, the traumas, the patterns that have come. And I look at my life now and I reflect and I see a lot of the uncertainty, a lot of the unsafe acts, a lot of the traumas that I've manifested into my own life have resulted from day one, when the trauma first happened, when I was taken away from my mum, left in a hospital for my first 6 months of my life, and the grief and the pain. But the strength and the resilience that I gained during that time came with me to serve me for my whole life. And in fact, when I was finally adopted, unwanted, but adopted, my dad wanted me, but my dad wasn't there much, and my mum didn't know how to love. So it was more traumas that I had to overcome. Emotional, physical, the whole bit. And again, those traumas came to serve me in my life for more traumas and obstacles that I was going to attract. So there's lots of gratitude, but there's lots of pain. And I've spent a lifetime of healing. You know, I've been doing so much healing in the last couple of years, and this time last year I met the lady that actually stood up, that was brave enough to stand up and advocate for the apology to be instigated in Canberra. And I met her and I was so proud of her, and what it was is that she's one person that stood up, and I thought, wow, one person can make such a difference. We hear of the beautiful story with the starfish and how you feel like you're not doing too much just by one starfish, but you know what, it takes one step. You can lead a movement and things can happen. And so with that, in this last 12 months, I had an issue regarding my identical twin and her whereabouts. I did the research. I went to my local member for parliament. I went to child services, and I actually was able to, instead of calling the hospital and being told that she was disposed of, which hurt me, there was no actual grave, no recognition of her birth whatsoever. So I fought this last 12 months. I advocated, and this last 12 months, not so long ago, I actually got her birth recognised. I've no doubt that she's around me right now, energetically. She guides me. She's a light, and I have faith to follow her divine guidance because she always knows more. She gives me my superpowers. That's why I assume, or I feel, she has gone to the next world, next life. However, I can't be positive because there isn't any burial. There is no funeral notices. There is no death certificate. So I continue. So today, coming to this ceremony meant so much. And it was really amazing because I'm just going to read you some little snippets. And before I do that, I just wanted to show you, I'm sitting here in Botanical Gardens, which is right near Parliament House, which is right near QUT, where my son hopes to study his engineering one day. It's a beautiful spot, beautiful part of the city. And if you haven't been, I encourage you to come along. This fell from the tree right where I was sitting. And I thought, wow, what a star. That is such a metaphor for how I'm feeling. Because today, well, I was a mess. I was vulnerable. You know, I had the tears, so many tears. And people do not understand. People say, just let go, forget, you know, move on. It's not as simple as that. When you're with someone for 9 months, and then all of a sudden, everything that you know changes forever. And you all of a sudden hear the clinical sound of hospital trolleys, hospital beds, and you're on your own. Don't think that that does not affect you. I spent my life being a people pleaser, trying to get the love that was just never around. I spent my life healing those wounds as well, and understanding that, you know what, I am chosen to be here. I am more than enough. I am worthy. My legacies will continue well after I leave this place. And I'm going to make this life count. So not only today is this for adoption, but also for the advocacy that I've been doing in the drowning prevention and safety industry, as well as the defence. I hold my head up high because had I not have gone through my adoption story, perhaps I wouldn't be strong enough to be able to implement, to facilitate the changes that are needed in those sectors, and to be strong enough to stand up and share my story. I'm here to make this life count, so I share. But I wanted to show you a couple of things. So this book was written by, there's a couple of books which I'm going to maybe put an adoption shop on Zanara, because there's a lot of people that have written beautiful songs and beautiful books, and this is a book. And you can see it's out in the trees. And it says, with hope there's healing. And here I am in the Botanical Gardens with all these beautiful trees that surround me. With trees, they start off with a seed and they flourish through all the storms and they weather through the whole life. And it's very much like adoption. You're born, you're chosen to be here. You have to overcome your first grief from day one. So congratulations to my fellow adoptees for doing that. We spent a lifetime of healing, as I mentioned, but I'm so proud of how far you've come. I wanted to show you this book with front cover. There's actually a book that I'm going to put together on the Avatar Collective on Zanara, and I'll have a lot of resources there. But you can see that beautiful book A crime not known. Look at the baby being taken away with the chains on. And that's how we feel as adoptees. You know, I'm going to read you a little segment, if I can see it. The history behind a crime not known. I'll have to put my glasses on. Just give me 1 second. And then before we finish, I'm going to read the Premier at the Times statement as well. I'll go there. So in 2010 to 2011, Australia held a federal Senate inquiry into the policies and practices of former forced adoptions. This inquiry revealed that there were over 250,000 adoptions between the 1940s to the 1980s, and unethical, unlawful and criminal practices occurred. Absolutely. And this is something that we're told to be quiet and not talk about. Sorry. The inquiry noted, even though it was impossible to estimate the actual number of forced adoptions which took place, the evidence exposed systematic abuse occurred across a variety of religious institutions, hospitals and welfare organisations, and not to mention when we were adopted into homes in those spaces as well. The era of forced adoption is where the mums were held against their will in religious institutions, forced to work in laundries and subjected to abuse, threats and coercion. Many of these women did not want to give up their children. Mothers are also reported being drugged, abused and threatened into giving consent by hospital staff and welfare workers. That to me is just horrific. You know, there wasn't any single mum pension back there, but you know what? Mums are resourceful. You know, no one should be forced to give up their child unless they wanted to. Most of these women, including my mum, were forced. Baby for adoption was secretly placed on the mother's files, even though they loved and wanted to keep their baby. Mothers were told to forget and just move on with their lives. Yeah, easier said than done. For you mums that are out there, think about that for a moment. You know, when you think, oh, you know, get over yourself, you shouldn't be concerned, you know, you're adopted, just live with it. I encourage you to think about it for a moment, you mums, to think when you deliver your child's taken away from you, from your arms, and the implications that come for that mum, but also for the child. Because energy is everything, as we know, and the traumas are deep. So not only are we getting it from our mum, but also our own traumas as well, which are ancestral as well. So I've spent my whole lifetime healing, but I am this strong, wise person because of it. But if I had a choice to not have to go through it, that would be an amazing opportunity. Most fathers were never informed, and they never gave consent for the adoption, and the names were actually omitted from the birth certificates. Babies were removed immediately at birth and denied the love and nurture of their mother and hidden in other sections of the hospitals. Babies who were never adopted were sent into the institutional care, of which I almost ended up at, even though they had a mother who loved and actually wanted them. Adopted babies were issued with a new birth certificate, their names changed, and any record of their true identity was sealed. So my actual name is Tracy Ann. And I was Rogers back then. Obviously I'm married now. So at some point I will be changing my name from Tammy to Tracy Ann. I haven't done that just yet. And I hadn't done it because my adopted mum, who I had to do a lot of healing from, who was my perpetrator and abuser, was still alive. But, you know, and it is difficult being in business to change your name, but it's something that I think that I need to do. So watch this space in my whole healing journey. There's a beautiful song that a lady has written, and it really does sum up a lot of what I've just described. I won't read it because it is quite long. I'll just read the first couple of paragraphs maybe. It is pretty amazing. It says, as I was born, I screamed and cried. They tore me from my mother's side. She begged and cried to no avail, her baby stolen with no trail. They said I was never hers, threatened her with unkind words. Her rights and mine were wiped away. Stamped for adoption became my tale, or my fate. Within the walls of screaming babes, my broken tears fell in silent pain. I died inside, split in two as unfocused eyes searched for you. In broken pieces, in deep despair, your stolen infant was more that you could bear. Never allowed to whisper my name, forced to live a life of shame. You know, it goes on. Because as I said, like, I spent my life trying to find my identity, who I am as a person, Why am I here? What's my purpose? All of these things, because I had no idea. I remember looking around, craving in my Cinderella story, looking at people, trying to see similarities, to think, are you my mum? Are you my mum? Because I had no idea. Fortunately, when our daughter, who's now 23, was just a baby herself, I was reunited with my mum, and it was the most special, momentous time. And she's such a beautiful soul, you know, and she would never have chosen to give me up, ever, for adoption. I missed that. I missed my life being with my mum. You know, there's a lot of gifts that came at us as a result, because I think she's very protective, and maybe I might not be as adventurous as what I am right now. But that was taken away from me to discover. So there is a lot of pain with this, and I'm trying to heal these wounds. I'm doing EMDR therapy, colonics, loads of different therapies to move on so I can be the best version of myself. But this is deep, deep, deep wounds. It's the primal wounds, and those primal wounds are really deep. I'm going to be sharing my adoption story. I've got a book that's coming out, but as a book collaboration through the Avatar Publishing, which is my journey when I first entered this world. So look out for that first. And my chapter is all about my entry into the world. My sister's chapter, who I've met, who was my dad's daughter, actually shares a chapter as well, so it's pretty exciting. But I'm also going to be sharing my full adoption story on a podcast story, which I'll turn into a book as well. That's happening next year, so I'm pretty excited about that as well. Lastly, Campbell Newman came along today, and why that is so important is because 10 years ago he was the Premier in Queensland. He was the leading force behind all of this and the apology in Parliament. He stood by, and he's remembered for his time. He spoke about, you know, being the Premier, and the most important thing that he remembers was the fact that he got this approved, so that every single year there's an apology and there's a celebration. So I just wanted to read a little part of what he said as well. And he says that it's time to apologise for forced adoptions. This is 10 years ago. Queenslanders devastated by past forced adoption practices are set to receive an apology from state government. Premier Campbell Newman today promised his government would publicly apologise at an upcoming sitting of state parliament. Interesting that I went there this year, isn't it? A federal Senate committee inquiry earlier this year found forced adoptions were widespread in the 1950s to 1970s and potentially affected thousands of families. Some women told of being physically shackled to their beds as their children were taken from them. Mr. Newman said many people were haunted each and every day of their lives by the experience. So this is not just the mums, but also the adoptees as well. You know, pretty full on. I'll move over here. We hope the official apology will help ease the pain felt by those people who have been so deeply affected and assist them in their healing process. Only a week ago, this is at the time, 10 years ago, in my electoral office, one of my constituents, who was born in 1967, poured out her heart-rending tale of what happened to her mother at birth here in Brisbane. This is quite similar to my story, actually. She's been searching for her identity for 25 years, and that was pretty similar to my story, trying to find my identity for that time. However, I was also trying to find my twin as well, which I'm still trying to search. This is a devastating experience for many, and it's a very sad time indeed in the state's history. That constituent was me, a simple wife and mother of 3 children, of which I am, who are my primary concern in life. I needed answers for them to be able to feel I could be the best mother I could be to them. I asked the Premier for the right to know what everyone else took for granted, the right to know who I was related to, so that these children did not marry a first cousin and pay the price for something they had no say in. To know my family medical history, so I would finally be able to answer the question that I'd been asked every time I had been to the doctor since I was a little girl. That's another thing that you guys don't think about. What is your family medical history? By taking the time each year to remember those who have gone before us, we can continue to educate and inform future generations so that these tragic events should never be repeated again. A true apology means trying to never make the same mistakes again. These traumas will continue. They're deep, the wounds are deep, and they will continue for a long time after, because it is energy and we spend our time healing these wounds. So I'm so proud that, first of all, they finally acknowledged it after all those years, and money was exchanged for us children as well back then. It was a racket, you know, and I can't even believe today, in today's world, that things like that happen, but they did happen, you know. And so with change, first comes acknowledgement, followed by apology, followed by changing the actual processes. This time last year, as I mentioned, I was told about this, how it all was started. I went and saw my MP, and that's how I got my my identical twins birth acknowledged. I'm actually in a fight right now against, not against defence, but there was some terrible acts that occurred to me for a very long time that were very unjust. The way it was treated once the court hearing was held was I was treated like the perpetrator. And in fact, years later, many years later, only a few years ago, I was told of an apology. However, that apology did not turn out to be an apology. More so, someone in a room fully just ridiculing me, making me feel bad, making me feel like a drama queen for standing up and sharing. And I'm scarred from that. I have PTSD from that time. So this next week coming up, I speak and I'm doing the first process. Now, moving on from that 3-year period, from that time where I was interrogated, I have been acknowledged for the crime that occurred to me, and a formal apology is about to happen. I have support with me, and I'm going to be starting that process next week. I think because of that, there's been a lot of pain and emotions that have come up, especially in my face. I've had to do myofascial massage to release all the tension that's come as a result from the nervous system. But I will stand, I will fight, and I will make sure that I'm acknowledged and apologised, and everyone else is apologised, so that processes and policies do happen to change, so that we can be the change in the world that we need to see, and that this stops so that it doesn't allow others to suffer the same abuse that I went through. I'm Tam, and I'm from Why You Can Too, and I am one person, just like you are one person. I am one person who has suffered a lot of injustices, who has gone through a lot of patterning, a lot of chaos and uncertainty, and I realise that now, and I realise possibly how my whole childhood experience was creating more and more of that. So I've been on a mission to try and heal my wounds, and in the same instance be strong, stand up, speak up, be the voice for many that aren't quite as strong enough, so that these policies do change. And guess what? I'm one person, you're one person. If you see something in society that's not quite right, you have the power to change it. Stand up and be the best version of yourself, and be the change in the world that you need to see. If I can do this, guess what? You can too. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.